And you're live.
Hey, folks, welcome, welcome. Once again, it's the illustrious Ape, V the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live. And we're here again with Harley Schlanger. He needs no introduction to all those listeners. He is the prolific thinker. He's somebody who's a prominent member of the LaRouche Pack and is out there putting out the ideas of sovereignty, of nationalism, of fair and open trade, and physical economies, and the things that the U.S. must do in order for us to survive the next 100 years as a nation upon this earth. And it's not that ridiculous gunboat diplomacy we've been running for several decades. Without further ado, Harley, welcome back on another edition of Hanging with Harley. How you doing, my
Good to
friend?
be hanging with you, V.
No, the honor's all mine, sir. You're always a treat, you know. But looks like they're going to have another event at the Schiller Institute. Hoping to get down there maybe this weekend, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting event. I mean, last weekend we were part of this event at Bayonne, New Jersey at the Teardrop Memorial, which included the New York City Police Department, the Bayonne Fire Department, and it also included a representative of the Russian UN mission, as well as the Schiller Institute and the families of the victims of 9/11. What
Yeah,
was important about it was that it was in commemoration of the Alexandrov chorus, which perished on Christmas Day in a tragic crash in the Black Sea.
right, right.
And that chorus had performed with the New York City Police Department. And in fact, one of their singers, someone with a beautiful voice who died in the plane crash, sang God Bless America as a solo for the New York City Police back in 2011, the 10th year anniversary of 9/11. So there's a bond between that group and the New York City Police. And it was put very well by the Russian UN mission official who said, when the Schiller Institute sang the Russian national anthem and the American national anthem, he said, when words fail, music speaks.
Amen.
And he said, music is the language of everyone. And I think, to me, when you look at the absolutely hideous political situation in Washington, with the media, yesterday's press conference was a brawl.
Yeah.
And Trump handled himself well, but why should the president have to put up with this kind of stuff? But I think even more important is that the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Director of National Intelligence are now completely discredited. And what they thought they were going to do to discredit Trump has
Yeah.
blown up in their face with this dossier, which is sort of like a bad James Bond movie, isn't it?
Terrible.
A British intelligence stringer goes to his Russian contacts. This is a guy who was a prominent member of MI6, Christopher Steele, goes to his Russian contacts and says, dig up some dirt on Trump that we can use in the Republican primary. Now, probably it was for the Bush campaign. And what they dug up was nonsense. And when the Bush campaign didn't use it, largely because Jeb dropped out because he was crushed by Trump, the Clinton campaign picked it up. But they didn't use it. The media in general probably saw that it wasn't particularly verifiable. But then why would Clapper and Brennan and their analysts include this in their so-called proof of Russian hacking the US election?
Yeah.
So it goes to show you that this has nothing to do with Russian hacking. It has to do with what LaRouche is calling a color revolution in the United States, in which Soros is working directly with the deep state intelligence community to try and stop Trump from changing the rules of the game.
Exactly correct. And Soros is an individual that we've seen that pushback in Hungary with Viktor Orban.
Yeah.
You know, cracking down on Soros NGOs. And the key phrase here that Orban said was, well, now that Donald Trump has been elected, we feel now is a good time to go after these NGOs. And I think that went over the heads of so many people because Trump's coming for Soros. I have no doubt about it. He can go after them with the JASTA law. He can go after them with the Patriot Act. I mean, every dead cop in America who's been killed this past year because all these riots and all this, Black Lives Matter nonsense, this, that, and the other, and every single person who's had their property defaced or destroyed, every single individual that was hurt in one of these riots, these victims Every drop of blood that was shed can be laid at the foot of George Soros. He's a criminally insane megalomaniac.
Soros also has the blood on his hands in Ukraine.
Yes.
He was one of the people behind the coup, the neo-Nazi coup that took power in Kiev.
Right.
His hands are all over the Middle East. His so-called human rights organizations out of London are the ones that are lamenting the defeat of Al Qaeda in Aleppo. Soros is trying to use his operation to run a coup in the Philippines. So, what you have here is a very dirty guy who got his start as a young man working with the Nazis, stripping the properties of his fellow Jews in Budapest.
Right.
And he bragged about it on 60 Minutes. Then he tried to destroy the evidence that 60 Minutes ever interviewed him. Soros, of course, was one of the key people responsible for building up the so-called netroots operation, the grassroots operation for Obama, with MoveOn.org and those other groups in 2008. And they illegally flooded caucuses, including in Iowa, that made the campaign take off. So here's a guy who has a career of destabilizations hand in hand with the CIA. And here's the irony. Soros makes no bones about it that he's a leftist, a left liberal, or a neoliberal,
Right.
working with criminal, what you might call the right wing of the military establishment, or not the military establishment, but the security establishment, the CIA and others. And the so-called progressives in this country who are falling all over themselves to get rid of Trump are now in an alliance with the very CIA that they've been denouncing going back to the beginning of the modern left after World War II.
Yeah.
Which got its start by going after the CIA in the coups that were pulled in Greece and Italy, the Mossadegh overthrow in Iran, Vietnam, Operation Phoenix, you name it. When I came up in the new left, the CIA was the enemy.
Right.
And now these boomers, I think they're approaching senility because they're going crazy defending the very people that they used to hate.
Right. Right. And it just goes to show, man, what strange bedfellows have been created all of a sudden with all this panicking of the deep state along with the establishment. Strange bedfellows indeed.
Back when the bailout was taking place, and then shortly after that, when Obamacare was being pushed, I had the opportunity to go to a couple of events in Austin, Texas, where you would see on one side of the street Tea Party people denouncing the bailout, denouncing Obamacare. And on the other side of the street, Occupy Wall Street was denouncing the bailout and Obamacare as an insurance fraud. So I'd go up to them and say, look, why don't you guys get together? Let's figure this thing out. We have a common enemy. It's Wall Street. It's the speculators. It's the people who are destroying the economy. Well, I can't work with right-wing nuts. But they agree with you. What makes them nuts? Now, the fact that Occupy Wall Street didn't get it back then meant that the Tea Party could be taken over by corporate right-wingers like Dick Armey and the Koch brothers.
Right.
So the Tea Party got turned into a somewhat mindless anti-government operation, when in fact it was initially against the government bailout. That effectively, we wouldn't be in the kind of economic crisis we're in right now. So when you talk about strange bedfellows, there's a lot of common interest. We saw it in the election. Bill Clinton and Obama voters voted for Trump in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Iowa. So we have a chance to turn the country around.
Yeah.
And I think that what people should be taking a certain amount of pleasure in is seeing these strange bedfellows where progressives are falling all over themselves trying to explain why they were defending Snowden and now they're defending Clapper.
Clapper, the man who's a psychopathic liar. It's unbelievable. But that's the thing with the far left, Harley. They have this mental dissonance. There's a cognitive dissonance. And all they have left is what is the trending axiom of the day that they can hold on to and put up as the banner, the axiom of the week, and everything else is forgotten. You know,
Yeah.
you see that with their support of Hillary, you see that with their support of Clapper and the deep state and the establishment. You see that with the we don't like the mainstream media. Now they're all for the mainstream media because everybody else is spreading fake news. Unbelievable. There's something seriously wrong with these people.
The cognitive dissonance gets back to what we started with, which is the collapse of the culture.
Yeah.
What's been done to this country has made it impossible for people to develop skills of critical thinking. And you see it in terms of the embrace of axiomatics. And there's no axiomatic system that actually describes effectively the physical universe, because the physical universe is not an axiomatic system. It's what you might call a constantly self-expanding, self-creating system. And if you think about the universe in that way, and you think about physical science and natural law in that way, you begin to see that someone who takes a fixed position is in the wrong universe. And this fight goes back a long time. It goes back to Plato versus Aristotle. So the problem is that the people who are in a bubble rarely realize they're in a bubble.
Yeah.
And that's why bubbles work in economics. The poor person on a pension who has a tiny bit of money in stocks sees the stock market go up and they think they're a genius and everything's fine. And they're one bad trade away from being destitute.
Right.
So this is part of the problem of it's not actually human nature, because I think human nature is characterized by this potential nonlinear capability to make new hypotheses concerning man and nature. If you can do that, you never get trapped. You look at the world as a whole and then identify processes within it that are not algebraic, they're not mathematical. That's what's wrong, V, as you and I have talked about this before, that's what's wrong with modern economic thinking. It's based on models that have no correspondence to the real world.
Correct.
But if the model works, if some guy at MIT can crank it up in a computer, then whose right is it for natural law to make the profit disappear?
Yeah. Exactly correct, man. Exactly correct. And that's what this whole entire thing is about. It's these ridiculous abstracts, vaporware that simply do not exist, and we're seeing it in so many facets of our economy. Um, it's amazing, man, because these things are all what I call machines. These are mischief engines. These are instruments of fraud and graft. That's the
Yeah,
only reason why this vaporware stuff exists. There's no other reason for it.
that's the whole point. Politically, when Glass-Steagall was repealed in 1999 by Republicans around Phil Gramm and then signed into law by Clinton, what they assumed was that somebody knew something about derivatives that was legitimate, because they had just remember, we had a crash in 1998,
Yeah.
the LTCM, the Russian bonds that nearly brought down the financial system. The year earlier, the whole Asian tiger model collapsed. And
Correct.
Soros was the one who triggered that one. So what was clear to me back then, and to LaRouche especially, is that the people who were designing these things knew they couldn't work. They were designing them as mechanisms of looting and suppressing people. But they brought into the fold a bunch of so-called rocket scientists who wanted to test out their theories without realizing that they were going to kill people by trying these theories out.
Right.
I think one time LaRouche referred to systems analysis as killers in four-piece suits carrying briefcases.
Very well said.
Look, we've seen this over and over, because the two bubbles that popped in 97 and 98, then with the repeal of Glass-Steagall, a new bubble was created, one which had been going on, which was the dot-com bubble, but then you went in directly into the housing bubble. And now we have a stock market bubble. The housing bubble, which was geared up again, is starting to collapse.
Yes.
But when Obama came in, I think the Dow was at something like 78, 7,900. Now it's pushing up to 20,000. And Obama's running around the country saying he's created a great economic miracle, and people are agreeing because they don't understand a stock market is something that can be manipulated repeatedly.
all the time. They don't realize how much it's rigged and how it has little to do with a sitting president, like especially like Obama. Especially it's been out that 94% of all the jobs that he's created is all part-time work. 94%.
Part-time and low wage.
Yep, part-time and low wage. That's his recovery.
Yeah. And the idea that somehow people who are living on 5 to 10% less income, less real income today than they were in 2008, feel secure and good about this president, I don't believe it. And I think that's why we saw the vote that took place last November that put Trump in the White House. Because it's not only that their theories are wrong, but their arrogance, their
Yes.
refusal to acknowledge that they made mistakes, their intent, or the fact that they continue to do the same thing after it failed shows there's a deeper intent to these models and to these policies, including environmentalism and the various Global 2000 and its offshoots. They intend to kill people. That's what these policies are for. And this is why we've been saying for years we're dealing with people who have a satanic mentality. It's not just that they make mistakes with the algebra or the geometry. It's that there's an intention to transfer wealth to the 1% and to turn the 70 to 80% at the bottom rungs of the family income brackets into slaves or people who commit suicide.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened in this country. And that's called the Obama recovery.
It's a wreck covery with a WRECK
Oh,
wreck covery.
well, it reminds me of the guy who's hopelessly lost driving and he's about to go over a cliff and his friend says, we seem to be lost. And he says, yeah, but we're making really good time.
We're making really good time. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly correct, man. We heard today, Harley, that Marine Le Pen is in the Trump Towers right now, meeting with Donald Trump.
That's interesting. I think the other thing you're going to see is Fillon is going to be orienting toward Trump. I think we're going to see Theresa May try to figure out some way to get in there, although so far Trump has basically kept her at arm's length, which is a good thing. Merkel, of course, has not made a move toward the United States, but there's going to be some hard lessons learned in Europe because the
Right.
issue here is not racism or isolationism that you keep reading about in the media. It's that Trump has made clear he's a non-interventionist when it comes to foreign wars. And the idea, I thought it was well put when he was asked, what does it mean that Putin likes you? And he said, I think it's an asset. If Putin
Right.
likes Donald Trump, that's an asset, not a liability, because it means you can talk. It means you can work together. So I think we're going to see some things shifting. I'm still nervous about some of these Goldman Sachs guys
Yeah.
in the
CJ, can you hear me?
Yeah, I did it. Harley, your mic dropped.
Oh, Harley, Harley, your mic dropped. Well, we'll just wait for Harley to come back on. But yeah, I mean, everybody is concerned with um, the appointments of certain Goldman boys. But I think there's a reason for that. And I think it fits my theory of the unwinding. We'll see what happens. Let's see if we get Harley back on. Harley, I have no way of. Harley's in Germany. I have no way of
I'll
getting.
send him an email real quick, V.
Yeah, send him an email real quick.
All right. Yep.
We're about the end of the broadcast anyway.
Okay.
All right, folks. I mean that's hanging with Harley. Let's see if we can get him back on. But there's a lot of great points that Harley's made, and every time he comes on, it's always an absolute treat. The deep state is in panic. The deep state is they're really terrified. And one of the things that we have to remember, moving forward, is they know the jig is up. They know that things are about to change in a very, very drastic way. The game cannot simply be played the way it's been playing. That's the whole thing. And people have to, understand that all this is the flailings of the deep state, the flailings of the establishment as it tries to kick against thorns, as it tries to change. It's trying to evolve as it's trying to stay relevant, and it's not relevant because the entire paradigm has changed, and they just don't get it. They're obsolete. The elites are obsolete. With that being said, folks, I don't think we can get Harley back in time. This is V, the Guerrilla Economist, and Harley Schlanger, who just can't be here at this moment, and CJ. We're over and out. CJ, take it away, CJ.